It's my pleasure to introduce this new series over the next 4 weeks about an introduction to the world of Batei Din and understanding the world of Batei Din. We are very, very honored and fortunate to have as our Maggid Shir for this series, and we hope it will be the first of perhaps many series of Rabbi Mann as well. We have Rabbi Mann, a renowned Maggid Shir and Dayan at the Eretz Chenda Bezdin, as well as a renowned Maggid Shir at Yeshiva University's Gris Kollel and numerous other institutions, Baruch Hashem. You may know Rabbi Mann, whether you realize it or not, from the Torah Tidbits. For many years, Rabbi Mann has written a halachic column known as the Weber Rebbe. And it's an honor to welcome him to the OU Israel Center. No, it's okay. The camera's above him. It's fine. You can sit. They can sit there. It's an honor to welcome him to Rabbi Mann to the OU Israel Center. I just want to thank once again the Brockville family for dedicating the evening-based Medrash program in memory of Mrs. Charlotte Brockville Aleh Shalom. And this is one of numerous shiurim programs that we have as part of this based Medrash program. We have people joining us both in person and, as usual, via hybrid, via Zoom as well. And without further ado, it's just to welcome Rabbi Mann. Sure. Shalom Aleichem. Tov. I have people. Does everybody have my makomos? They're over here. Pass them out. Let me not. Okay. Press down. Okay. Do not be concerned, or maybe you can be disappointed. We're not going to see all 17 sources inside. Certainly not all of them. We'll see bits and pieces here and there. I like to consider myself a teacher more than a lecturer, so I am happy to engage questions. On this topic, I would request not to be too specific. It happened to me once that they did this to me and I did that and they did this. Was I right? Let's not go there. Let's keep the questions more general. I'll have to see myself. I have been doing this based in stuff for somewhat over 20 years. I didn't plan to speak about a specific case. In some ways, it's better not to get into any specific cases, even in a general way. But I might be convinced by a question to give somewhat of an example, see how we go and how much we keep to the script and how much we get on to a discussion. I would guess that most people in our community have never been taken part in a based-in proceeding. I have taken part in based-in proceeding. I've never taken part in a based-in proceeding as a litigant. I hope to keep it that way. You can never be sure, but I do hope to keep it that way. That is, again, it's nice. It's not a mitzvah to go to Beis-Din, if that's what it's called upon. But there's not every situation. There's a proper halachic way to do. Do you want to be in that situation? So if you can get out of being a litigant, that is a good thing. We will discuss. I think. Remember, it's the second week or the third week. I think the second week. Next week we'll talk a little bit about pshara, which is sort of an alternative to din, and a little bit controversial Talmudically whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's a way out from having to paskin according to the din, and there are different reasons for it. But avoiding based in itself is good. That's again avoiding based in because you avoided the conflict, or you were able to deal with the conflict in a way which didn't require adjudication. It is not, as probably most of would take part in this would probably know, it is considered forbidden to adjudicate in a form of adjudication outside of a based-in, for two Jews to adjudicate outside of a based-in situation. There are exceptions to the rule. Maybe we'll touch on a couple of those exceptions, but that is the rule. And it's something that people don't always appreciate, and sounds a little bit like
I even have gotten the accusation that the rabbis are doing it to drum up business for themselves, which is, I don't know if it was ever could be claimed that the Batei Din that I've worked for lose money on almost every case they hear. Okay, just the operation of the Beis Din is just, it's not to drum up business, and it comes from the Shulchan Aruch, and it comes before the Shulchan Aruch, comes from the famous Rashba that maybe we'll see a little bit of it, and we'll try to understand a little bit why is it that we want that adjudication happen in front of Beit Din. Okay, so if you take a look at your sheets, again, if anybody doesn't have it now, we're not going to read a lot, and I will translate everything, at least approximately translating. Asur ledun b'fnei dayanei uvdei kochavim ube'arkaot shelahem. You're not allowed to go to non-Jewish courts. Afilu b'din shedinam danim b'dinei Yisrael. Even though in this case the exact same law, take the law books, exactly same law in both cases. Even if you could figure that out, which wouldn't be so easy to figure out because every case also has sub elements to it, hard to know. But in any case, even if we were sure, it still would be asur. Vafilu nitratzu shnei balei dinim ladun b'fneihem asur. And even if the two agreed, it would still be asur. And it goes on, v'chol haba lidon b'fneihem arei ze rasha. Whoever goes before such a person called a rasha, uchilu chireif v'gideif, he was blasphemed Hashem, heirim yad b'torat Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, and sort of rebelled against Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. Very, very strong words. One would I mean, there are other places in the Shulchan Aruch where there's strong words, but this is particularly strong words considering one would think is what's at stake. And the question is why is halacha so strict about this? What's the problem? There's a little bit of let's say that there are two reasons why one is supposed to go to adjudicate in front of Beis Din and not in a different forum. Okay, in an alternative, competitive, so to speak, and we'll discuss it soon, forum. What would the two reasons be? Anybody have ideas?
Air dirty laundry in public.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, that you want to keep it within the mishpacha. Okay. That's not one of the ones that's, I think that would be a side interest that would be true, but I think that's not the two main reasons that I think are given.
To give priority of non-Jewish law over Jewish law.
Not to give priority. Okay, so that's going to be the second one. The first one, maybe I asked it too late. The first one is that, well, you're supposed to follow halacha, and if somebody wins when halachically he shouldn't have won, then he's either stealing money that doesn't deserve.
The lashon in Gemara is, even if inadvertently you come into something like Yerusha, because I deal with that.
Okay.
It's called gezel.
Right? So you're stealing some. According to halacha, you don't deserve the money, and you won the case, you got the money. Or you're required to pay, and you got out of paying money. That would be a form of gezel or hakasha, different, depending on the case, what it would be. Now, the other one, but we in the Shulchan Aruch, we seem to have a hint that that's not enough, because there's a case in the Shulchan Aruch which would not be covered in that case. And that's the end of the first line, beginning of the second line. Va'afilu nitratzu shnei balei dinim ladun b'fneihem. Even the two sides agreed to adjudicate. They both agreed to adjudicate in this form, the form of a say secular court, a non-Jewish court. It would still be forbidden. Now, there's a big, maybe the biggest rule arguably the biggest rule in Dinei Mamanos is that you follow agreement between people. Okay, if the halacha is a shomer chinam that only pays for pshia and not for gneva v'aveda. Those who learned hamafkid or shavuos, so halacha comes up. The two sides, says the Mishnah, masna shomer chinam lios kishoel. That somebody can be a watchman who's not paid for watching, and he should have relatively light levels of responsibility. He can say, I'm willing to accept upon myself to say the same halachot of a shoel. And then he has to pay like a shoel, even though the halacha is that he doesn't have to. Well, the halacha changes Not like it would change in the Hilchos Shabbos. It changes because, well, that's what the Torah says when you don't agree. But if you agree to your own rules, then you follow the rules that you agree upon. That's a basic thing. So if we say, listen, if we could go to Beis Din, and then maybe I would win, maybe you would win, but I'm willing to accept upon myself that even if I don't deserve, you don't deserve, or I should have to, whatever the case is, we accept that rule and we make it in a binding type of agreement. That should work. It won't be gezel anymore. And still it says you can't do it. Still it says you can't do it. So it says at the end, there's a little bit of a thing. Herim yad ki'ilu cheref gedef. A person may not have bad intentions, but as if he's blaspheming and he rebels against the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Says the Sma, which is based on the Rashba, which is in source number 2. It sounds like you're saying that you don't have confidence in the Torah. It sounds like you don't have confidence. Why would you go to this different court? Presumably, you're going to this different court because you think you have more trust in it. Oh, what are the rabbis? The rabbis, the Gemara, it's like 2,000 years old, 1,500 years old. Mishnah is older than that. Yeah, what do they know about our times? What do they know about this? The legal system's gotten better and better, and they know better, chas v'sholom, than Abaye and Rava and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, etc., etc. And therefore, you are blaspheming the Torah in that way. And now, that in some cases, that really is what people are thinking. I don't trust the Torah. I don't like I don't think the logic is rigorous enough, etc., etc. And that would be the case. Yes.
Jewish courts though don't have the power to, let's say in England or America,
Okay.
a Jewish Beit Din doesn't have the power. Let's say you've won your case and you owe £10,000. What can they do about actually getting the money?
Well, absolutely can do. You have an answer?
I have an answer for him, but I have another question I was going to.
Okay, so let's do with his.
Answer first.
Okay.
First of all, you sign an arbitration agreement when you go to. First of all, America and Israel is very different. The Batei Dinim. I've been to both as an attorney. You're right. In America, they can't force the verdict. You sign an arbitration agreement before they even start the Din Torah, and then whatever psak the Beis Din issues, you take that arbitration agreement and you file it in America in civil court. And what they could do is they could put a lien. I mean, they have a lot of things they
Yeah.
could do. But
I know it's
But in
not
Israel-
just based in. It can be. You can go to retired. Sometimes the retired judges do that. Have a
but
business
it's
with.
different here. Here, the Batei Dinim, the Dayan affirms it like a notary. I do this.
Are you talking about Savi Yerusha?
I'm talking about a postnuptial
Okay.
agreement. I go
Okay.
to Beis Din here.
Fine.
And the Dayan ascertains that there's no duress between between the husband and wife, that no one was pressured into
Right.
making the bishara.
But you're talking about a government court.
I'm talking about the Beis Din of Yerushalayim here. That's where we go off Yirmiyahu Street, the big one.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
But that's through the government.
Haredi Beis Din, I can tell you that much.
Okay.
That's the Dayan I'm sitting on there. Anyway, the Dayan, after
Right.
he's convinced that neither party pressured the other into that agreement, he affirms it, and that holds up in Israel.
Right.
In America, you have to go file it with the
So
school.
in general, when we talk about adjudication, it's also based on the same basic thing about arbitration law. No, it's what we don't have authority to.
Yeah, but you said something that I had a question about.
Just 1 second. So basically, yes, if it's the process is done correctly, you don't. A Beis Din would, at least the Beis Din I work for, there may be place.
Affirm it.
We have a signed arbitration agreement beforehand, and then when we finish it, we sign sign and seal the agreement, and then they can take it to what's called Hotzah Poal. If Hotzah Poal can enforce it. If somebody says it was false, it was based on this, they took a bribe, they didn't listen to me, they can go to court and try to uproot it. And if it's done properly, that unless something really strange happens, that it is affirmed and is enforceable.
But you're
Yes.
describing a litigation.
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 Yeah.
What well, the question I was gonna
Okay.
ask you has to do with an agreement, a contract between two people.
Right.
Whether it's prenuptial, which is, sometimes it overrides the obligations of the ksuba. But they agreed to it before they got married on this one agreement, the two parties. Or a postnuptial agreement, where they've married 50 years and they wanna
Right.
make sure that all their wishes are kept.
Right.
When one of them is gone, or
Right, okay.
demented or something. But that's an agreement.
That's an agreement. That's
yeah,
not that's not adjudication. Right. Okay, fine. So I want to explain a little bit more what's behind this idea about sort of not accepting the Torah. So on the one hand, it's an affront to the Torah. But in other words, we don't think the rabbis did a good job. But it's not. I believe it's not only that. I believe that it's also sort of making the claim that religion is for religious things. You know, Shabbos, Tefillah, brachos, kosher. You know, that's religious stuff. For that, you know, that's, you need to look in the Torah. The Torah says about this. When it comes to money, money is money. You know, that's not religious. You know, so I don't mind if the dayan, he might have smicha also. You can have somebody smichin is a physicist. You can have somebody smich. I don't mind, but the Torah doesn't have something to say about it. This is money. So that is very much against our philosophy. Our philosophy, the Torah is a Torah's Chaim, that the Torah has what to say about tefillah and about brachos and kashrus and Shabbos and marriage and stuff like that. But it also has to say about damages and loans, and this is very much part of the Torah. And by saying, no, I'm only going to go to rabbis when I have a religious question, this is not a religious question. The answer is no. This is also a religious question. So I think that is a part of it. Source number 2, a few sources quoted here by the Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef, for those who are less familiar, summarizes a lot of what was found in the Rishonim on the topics found in the Torah. So here is a somewhat lengthy quote of the Rashba, one of the most important Rishonim, who talks about the tension between what we're saying now, that the Torah has what to say about Dinei Mamanos, about monetary law, and the rule of Dina Malchus Adina, that the rule of the land, the law of the land is the law, and something which has very much related to that, and that is that you follow minhag hamakom, that in monetary disputes you follow what is accepted. In other words, if it's clear in society, maybe it's not even the law, but everybody knows that when two people make an agreement, this is a certain set of assumptions that they're making, that even if the assumptions in the Gemara are different, you would follow what people in general, this is a rule, there are exceptions to the rule, you would follow the practice. So if that's the case, so we should always, look at what's the most update. Let's take the most update system and follow that. So that the Rashba agrees to Dina Malchus Adina, but he says it basically depends how you do it. He makes certain distinctions, and at the end, again, read the last 3 lines. Somebody who chooses a different system, ubichlal oker kol dinei Torah shlema. He's uprooting the complete Torah, the perfect Torah. He's uprooting it. Umalas lanu sefrei hakodesh hamukdashim hamukudashim shechibu lanu Rabbi v'acharav Ravina Ravashi. Who cares about the Mishnah? Who cares about the Gemara? According to this person, yilamdu et b'neihem dinei hagoyim v'yivnehem bamot tluot. Okay, he's talking sarcastically here. According to this approach, let them just teach everything non-Jewish. Why teach anything Jewish? You're building altars to other gods. Chalilo tekezot b'Yisrael, chas v'shalom, shema tachgor torasak alehem. The Torah will give up on them and their worth. Okay, so I believe this is the second part. Again, it's not about stealing, because even if the two sides agree, it's about not accepting the Torah as relevant as the relevant thing. Now, if you go to a Beis Din, you can invoke Dina de Malchus Dina. You can invoke the practices. Okay, not every Beis Din has exactly the same approach. Our Beis Din is quite interested in Dina de Malchusa. Okay, it will very often play a major part in the Psak Din. Sometimes we'll quote a law. Sometimes we'll quote a ruling of a secular judge, if relevant. Okay, when it's relevant and when it's not relevant, that's a good question. So it doesn't mean that we don't accept Dina Malchusa Dina, but it has to be under the rubric of what the Torah has to say about the matter, and this is part and parcel of our Torah belief. Questions at this point?
So again, on that, when in this country, when you enter into a legal contract with somebody else, that legal contract is under Dina de Malchus Dina. It's not under Jewish law. So why is
not necessarily? Not every case has a law that relates to a specific case. Okay, there are laws. The laws, first of all, it is possible for there to be a law that a Beis Din will decide. We'll get maybe in this third share. Maybe we'll get into this a little bit. Could be cases where the Beis Din will say this law is not something that we're going to follow. But very often it's just the adjudication is not based on the law. The adjudication is based on the case, and there's certain rules. Rules of legal logic, which, by the way, are very similar in most court systems, because most of Choshen Mishpat is based on human logic. Now, when we're talking about within Choshen Mishpat is human logic of brilliant rabbis who, yes, were influenced by some psukim, but most of the thing is based on their legal analysis. The legal analysis of somebody who learned a lot of Torah, somebody who did a lot of thinking, a person who had a lot of practice in this area, but it's based on human legal logic. And human legal logic is similar, not 100%, but is similar in most systems. And there's room for different opinions within courts. There'll be room for different opinion. One judge will say one thing, another judge another thing. One level, the basic court will say this, the appeals court will say that, then the Supreme Court will say a third thing. There is room for this, but it's not just saying, okay, it says, let me just look in the law, this is what we do here. That doesn't work that way.
There's things that human legal logic does not address. Classic example is principle. So that's the
there are cases that are totally of religious later. The laws of Rabbi although there are laws of Rabbi by non-Jewish courts as well. I mean, if you have unreasonable, I don't know every system in the world, but I think in most systems, if somebody agrees to unreasonable rate of interest, then it will be voided by the courts. But unreasonable one, okay, there's a religious obligation based on the mitzvah to lend money. That's probably the building block of it. That is a religious law. And yes, you should not give rebit even if the courts, according to law, it is legal. Then you're not allowed to do it in any case. But that's the exception that's one of the exceptions to the rule, in which it is religious in nature. Okay, now there are cases that, in other words, based on the reasons, certainly the second reason we're saying, it's a little bit of a situational type of law. In other words, by choosing these courts, you are throwing away the Torah. What if you have a situation where, under the circumstances, the fact that you go to a different court system is not a sign of your throwing away the Torah? Wouldn't that make a difference? Okay? Now, in most areas of halacha, I would say, I don't care about the intentions. The Rambam has all sorts of theories as to what's the reason behind this mitzvah. Kasha is because of this, and this is because of that. All sorts of explanations, what's the logic behind it. But we don't say, well, it was based on pagan practices. We don't know any pagans anymore, so let's just get rid of the halacha. We don't say that in Torah. But there might be certain situations, some areas of halacha lend themselves to being flexible somewhat on the situation. One of the famous cases is if you have one side who is not willing, let's say I sue somebody, I sue Reuven, and he refuses to come to Beis Din. I sue him in Beis Din, and he refuses to come. And I tried, and I spoke to the rabbi, tried to put pressure. He's not willing to come. So what am I going to do now? I can't. The courts are not going to enforce it, that he has to come to Beis Din. Once upon a time, by the way, they would. I don't know. I know the European lands a little bit better than the Muslim lands, but many places in Europe and hundreds of years ago, that two Jews had an argument. They went to Beis Din. That was what the courts were for Jew and a non-Jew, non-Jew and non-Jew. But the Jews had authority over their community. Okay, but that's not the case for the last few hundred years in places that we have lived. Somebody's not willing to come. So what do? I lose the money? Because if I sue him in court, then I'm revolting against the Torah. Okay, if I can't get kosher food, I want to eat meat. I can't get kosher meat. Okay, can't get kosher meat. Okay, so not kosher? Of course not. Can't do that. Pikuach nefesh. Yes. Other than that, no. But over here, it's two things. First of all, I tried to go to Beis Din. I tried. It didn't work, and therefore I'm not rebelling against Hashem. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is we don't want to create a advantage for a person who says, "Oh, I'll just say no. I know the guy's really frum. He will never go to a secular court. I'll say no to Beis Din, and he can't sue me. Wonderful, great system. I don't have to pay." So you can't give him that benefit, and therefore between those two reasons, probably both of them are correct. You are allowed to go to secular court, a non-Jewish court, depending where you are, and Beis Din writes a letter allowing one to do that. Once upon a time, that letter was kind of, let's say, a little bit harsher teeth than it has now. Elements of curse to it. Nowadays, the Batei Din, we just give permission. We don't say any choice words for the person who refuses to come. Give permission to go to court, to the secular court. There can be other cases that are a little bit more interesting. That I got a question a bunch of years ago. At Eretz Chemda we have a Beis Din. We also have an Ask the Rabbi service, which is the Torah Tidbits comes to the questions that were asked at Eretz Chemda. We share one of them a week with other publications, including the OU's own Torah Tidbits. Got a question a bunch of years ago from somebody who's a lawyer in a country that has a very small Jewish population, and they don't have a Beis Din. Okay? When they need to have a Din Torah or something, then they go to a Beis Din in a different country. Okay? But this person is aware of a dispute which is not financially, doesn't make sense to spend, I don't know, $200 to go to fly 1,000 miles away and pay 3 times the price on the flight and the hotel, etc., to go to Beis Din. So over here, neither side refused, but are you required to go? So this would also be a case where you say that I'm not rebelling. It's just not. It's not always feasible to do this. Exactly where to draw the line is a very good question. I'm not going to go into much detail now. I would say also that the answer to this question is likely different now than it was certainly 100 years ago.
Or even 2 years ago.
What's that?
Or even 2 years ago.
Maybe even 2 years ago there's also change, but yeah, one could argue even 2 years ago.
You can't go to the United States. I think it's pretty clear.
Oh, you can't go to the United States, right? Okay, but I mean, 2 years ago, many of our lives have changed significantly in the last 2 years, based on the health situation. But one of certain things in my life have expanded. I give shir. I'm giving shir tonight on Zoom. I give shir twice a week on Zoom. I've done Dinei Torah on Zoom. Okay, it's not preferable. Okay, if one can do it in person, one is supposed to do it in person, but it's a possibility. And therefore, if one has a choice between, once upon a time you didn't have one, it wasn't, the next Basin is 50 miles away, on a horse and buggy, on donkey, by foot. You're talking about different times in history. May not be so possible. The Gemara in Sanhedrin talks about Erkaot Shebasuria. Apparently, that area of what's called Syria, which is probably approximately present-day Syria, apparently they were lacking of people who were learned enough to be dayanim. So sometimes they would have a situation would come up, and they would go to these erkaot of people who were not fit to be dayanim. And one could go to there. I brought you source number 3, which I don't think I'm going to read inside now. But source number 3 discusses the topic about when you would be able to go to Erkaot Shebasuria as an imperfect substitute for going to Dayanim who know Choshen Mishpat. Okay? It said, well, they don't have to be experts, but they need to know basic halacha. Okay, that's one thing. Maybe read a couple words towards the end, a couple lines, and says, ומכל מקום צריך לבדוק אחר אנשים כשרים, יראי אלוקים, שונאי בצע, ואנשים מבינים מדע. Okay, they don't have to be experts, they need to be people who are ksherim. That obviously doesn't mean to eat. Upright people who fear God, who hate the idea of taking bribes, and people who understand, madai doesn't even mean science here, people have logic. Okay, people who understand a little bit of logic and proper analysis, even if they're not experts in Choshen Mishpat, that is something that would be required. So we see different levels of alternatives. If you can't have X, the Gemara, do I have this here? Source number 6, which I'm also not going to read inside, I don't think, unless I change my mind. Source number 6 also talks about a situation where you have a based in here, but it's not really on the level to do a perfect job in the case. Some parts of it are too complex to deal with. So what do? Should you go to an expert based in, which is called the Makom Avad, like a regional court? Okay, we live in the shtetl somewhere. Okay, here we have a little based in, but this is a complicated case. We don't know if the little basin is really going to be able to handle it well. Should we go to the regional based in 50 miles, 100 miles away? So the Rav Safra says over here, Kofinoto v'dan mi'iro, that you force the one who wants to go to the higher level basin, you force him to say, no, we're going to do it here. V'im hutzrach davar lish'ol, kotvin l'sholchin. If the local basin says, well, this is over my head, this I understand. I know how to interview the sides, I know how to ask questions, we know how to do the basics, but we may get to a point that we don't know the answer to this question. Then you send the question. A lot of what we know about Choshen Mishpat, in many areas of halacha, is based on responsa literature. Okay? Responsa literature, once upon a time, it's not like nowadays. Most of the questions that are asked of even big rabbanim nowadays, probably are asked by whom? Laymen or rabbis?
Rabbis.
So I would think it's still nowadays it would be laymen.
Oh.
The most of the volume of questions being asked. Once upon a time, the big shuvot that we have, the shuvas Rashban, the shuvas Maram this and Maram that, and the questions were asked of rabbis. And there was a local rabbi had a question, 90-something% of the questions he answered himself. But he'd get one like, whether it be on Kashrus, or an Aguna, or Shabbos, and then, well, this one's over my head. Okay, and they'd go and ask the Poskei Hador, the greatest rabbis. Now, the local rabbis, most of their names are from 600-700 years ago, most of their names are lost for history, except if their name is found in the first line of one of the big Chuvas. Chuvas Arashba, L'chvod Harav, such and such, Rav of this town. And he would ask the question. So you have it. Some of the Dinei Mamonos questions were asked of the greatest rabbis of the generation, were asked by local Rabbanim and local Batei Din, who said, okay, I can handle most of this case, or most of the case, but this one I can't, you'll send away. Okay, so it is possible, there are alternatives, and nowadays, again, better than to go to an entire different system, it is better to go in front of a Beis Din through Zoom in your town, in your country that has no Beis Din, than to go to a secular court locally. Okay?
Have the Rabbanim done it through Zoom? Has there been
Absolutely.
cases? And they paskened and it's gone through?
Absolutely.
Can you do Kinyan through Zoom?
You can do it, you can maybe witness it on Zoom.
But can you be Mikado?
No, you can do it in front of, excuse me, you would do it in front of in front of witnesses, local witnesses. You don't need a Beis Din. Okay? I mean, in this type of case, if I were doing it, we would have people sign an arbitration agreement before.
Well,
The Kabbalah Kinyan is
It's really should be.
the Kabbalah Kinyan is not really required if you have an arbitration agreement. Okay, so before you do it, I mean, I did one case 15 years ago. Must have been 15 years ago. Both people were in America. Why? A relative of one of them knew our Beis Din, and they suggested for whatever reason that they come to us. They were in America. We agreed to do it. I did it by, well, then there was no Zoom, then it was Skype. Some had some technical difficulties in those days. I think that was the first time I used Skype, 15, 16, I don't know exactly. But we did it. And nowadays it's done more. Now sometimes we do it, because of health reasons. Okay, the numbers are growing. We're not willing to sit 7, 8 people in a room. And we do it by Zoom. We have special agreement. If one says, no, I'm not willing to, I'll wait until this is over, then we'll do that. But yeah, it is done. It is done when felt necessary. So that wouldn't be such a common case nowadays, but in theory, it certainly would make sense. Again, here's one of the things, that if this is basically the only practical alternative, then you're not Miriam Yado B'Torat Moshe, and if the two sides agree to this, then it's not considered stealing. Okay, if they would be in a case that say we couldn't do it by Zoom, whatever the case would be, or one side doesn't agree to come at all, then you can go to the secular courts. And there's a very interesting question: what happens? I was Tovei Reuven said, no, I'm not going to Beis Din, go to secular courts, and then I win. And then he says, well, now that he lost, he said, well, you're going to take the money from your based in the secular court, and now we have to go to Beis Din. Now that I lost, now I'll go to Beis Din. Okay, this is, the Jewish mind has been fertile for a very long time. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. The poskim talk about it, and there is someone in machlokas about it. If I know, there's two different questions. One question is, I know that I'm wrong. I discussed with a friend of mine, and he said, well, you're wrong. He should have got, you're right to go to Beis Din. He refused. You're allowed to go to, but according to halacha, you're wrong. But then you won. So then what do? So then I think most say that if you know that you're wrong, then you shouldn't take the money. But if you don't know, I don't know what happened in Beis Din. Okay, so put you were so firm before that, so you go to Beis Din now. Then the accepted ruling is that no, a person doesn't get double jeopardy, doesn't get to say I lost here. This is what you chose. This is what you are. You have to accept. That is the more accepted approach. Okay, questions at this point?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
It's quite a difficult one. In the medical
then I might not
field,
answer.
okay, in the medical field, if you've got a dentist or a doctor who's got medical insurance, and there's a patient and the medical practitioner or the dentist. Now, if you go to the Beis Din, and if the dentist or the doctor loses, then he has to pay privately, but he's got insurance, and if he goes to a secular, the insurance will pay it.
Right.
So what do you do?
Right.
Well,
You-
it should never happen to me, but or anyone. But what do you
Right.
do? What do you do?
That's usually that's I can't speak for all Batei Din, but if it's a case that that the doctor would have to pay out of his pocket and otherwise he's insured,
Yeah.
then the general assumption is that you can go to the courts. I don't want to. Every case can be a little bit different. I don't want to go on a limb. Say as a rule, if this happens, one should go to a Beis Din and tell the Beis Din what the situation is. Again, every case is
Yeah.
slightly different from the other one. So but it is a major thing. It does happen, by the way. Beis Din I believe, is getting more accepted in society than it was. First of all, in religious society. Okay, I don't think I'm the youngest person in the room. I think when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I think very few Orthodox Shomer Shabbos, very makbid and halacha people went to Beis Din when two Jews had adjudication. It has picked up steam in the last several decades. I think in Israel that's the case as well, and I think it's more respected. We have people who are not apparently. It can also be cheaper, can also be quicker, but I think it's quite respected. If Beis Din has a philosophy which seems compatible with the people involved. We've had people who are not religious. I'm trying to remember if we had, the case that was talking about by Skype, neither of them were, as far as I know, were religious. Again, it was a very strange why they came to us. I'm trying to think how many cases I had where neither side was religious. But I've had the one who initiated was not religious. And they came to Beis Din. Maybe sometimes they thought they would listen. Sometimes in the agreement, there's a contract. And the contract says it has a arbitration stipulation, which is a very important thing to have. To have arbitration stipulation, because sometimes the amount of fighting that you have about jurisdiction is half the problem. Okay. People will put into with their agreement, whether it's a rental agreement or it's an employment agreement. Employment gets more complicated because some things are not binding in any type of arbitration, but it'll say a clause about going to where you're going for adjudication. Sometimes it'll be to a certain judge. Sometimes, in theory, it can be, I imagine you write an arbitration agreement that we will flip a coin in front of the Eiffel Tower. I don't want to go out on a limb, maybe not. I would think if it's that could be binding arbitration agreement.
The arbitration agreement can call for a Beis Din.
Absolutely, and it's become more and more popular.
By the way, you probably are the youngest person, I'm not the oldest.
Could be. Where did I get into this? But to times that one would come specifically the
You're allowed
basis.
to go to a non-Jewish court.
Right. So you could go to again. Yeah. Oh, to your question about yes, these cases, complicated questions do come up about maybe this is a reason that's not really possible to do. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Yes.
Another exception, is it possible that the Beis Din says, well, this requires too much technical expertise and, I don't know, certain complex shareholder issues, and you have specialized courts in Tel Aviv which just as commercial issues. Can Beis Din then say, well?
In theory, yes. In practice, almost never.
Because they can call in experts.
We call in experts, the courts call in experts. Listen, I wouldn't say, I think that I'm humble enough to say there might be a case of like, oh, this is going to be hard. I'm going to have to learn. I've never done this type of case. This is, I don't think I've ever punted. That's what at least Americans call it punting. Because I don't know if it's any outside of American football point of views. But I don't remember ever punting. Basically,
What does that mean?
What does it mean?
Okay, it is
When you're
punting means
back
you.
behind the football line, you kick the ball
I don't know what it
Right,
means.
well, you
Give it
you
away.
pass it on to somebody else. You say, I can't handle this. Here, you take it. Pass. Okay, so in theory, it could happen. In practice, not. Unfortunately, sometimes there are people who will make that claim. Some people are very religious people, or apparently very religious people, who refuse, don't go to Beis Din, say, "Oh, no Beis Din can handle this," and it's not. Again, I'm not thinking about. Well, I'll try not to think. As I speak, said I'm not thinking things are coming to my mind. There are more famous cases, less famous cases of people you would have expected to go to Beis Din and didn't. I don't know. No, nothing. No. I certainly only to think, and I even thinking I don't want to do about specific cases, but it. I guess in theory it could possibly be, but there are enough Batei Din, and many of them have enough, also have enough resources. We're connected with people who have degrees in engineering and degrees in finance and degrees in in addition to having experts in the specific case. Yeah.
There are famous cases that drag on for years of testimonies, the presenting of evidence.
Right.
Is Beis Din set up to do that?
Yeah.
To really take a case that could run for months and months?
Years and years.
Yes, wow.
Okay. Let me just say that I don't want to be too specific, but in the very recent past, I was sitting in hearings of something which has been going on for 4.5 years,
Sure.
and I'm trying to push it. I don't know what number hearing it was and how many in between. Yeah, it happens. Sometimes, some of the complexity drags things out on our side as well. Sometimes sometimes the sides drag it out. Sometimes life drags things out. But yeah, we're equipped to do it. Start being a dayan when you're young, so you have a bunch of years to. I mean, I've sat with different dayanim who have like bigger responsibilities. They were 35 when we started the case. Now they're 38 and they're Rosh Hashiva somewhere. And okay, then they start the case. They're going to finish it. Except one case, we had one case that I sat where the dayanim became. But dayanim in the government courts, and we looked into it. It was illegal. I don't know, not like legal, like what the penal code. It was against the laws of the government courts to allow them to continue to moonlight as finishing up their old case. So we had to get new dayanim. That was the case we had to.
The case starts again?
No, we continued. It was that case. We only lost one. Somebody else took his place.
And we're just talking about civil, like mamonos?
Yeah, we're talking about. What I'm talking now is Dinei Mamonos.
What happens?
Okay, I should point that out. Yeah, I don't know I remember what the title over here. I'm talking about. I have worked in America in the Beis Din of America, the Beth Din of America, and I sat both on monetary cases and cases have to do with personal status and divorce. So Beit Din, like the Bet in Israel, it's broken up very much. There are like the things that have to do with marriage, divorce, personal status, conversion, which is a different set of Batei Din. The government gives jurisdiction to rabbis. Once upon a time, the rabbis could also sit in arbitration. Both sides wanted to go. We don't want to go to Sacred Court. We want to go to the Beis Din of the Rabbanut in Yerushalayim, in Tel Aviv, wherever we are. That until 2006. If they signed the arbitration agreement, they could go to those same dayanim that they might go to for divorce. Since 2006, the Supreme Court made it illegal and non-binding to go to the government courts, in which case, if they want to go to Beis Din, they have to go to a private Beis Din. It could be a small private Beis Din. It could be the Beis Din of the Badat and Eidach Haredis, which probably, the members of that community would consider a national Beis Din from their perspective. I work for Eretz Chemda Gazit, which is, we're private, we're an organization, we're non-profit, and we have, in some ways we're national, that we have 7 or 8 Batei Din, from the south to the north, but still it's legally, it's totally a private private thing, and this is only for Dini Mamonis. It's illegal for us to do a get. It's illegal for us to do a conversion, I believe. I'm not sure about that. I believe that is. I'm not sure.
So why is that? Because you've chosen only to do one.
No, because
Law of
there
Israel.
is jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction of Israel handles all of that. You
The,
can't.
the state of Israel says on
can't do
monetary
marriage, you
things,
can't
you
do
go
anything.
here.
Right.
If you live here, you go there. If you this amount of money, you go under this amount. You go to small claims afterwards. You go to mechazi, the different things. It's for religious things. Wills has its own rules, and actually Israel has a separate court just for employment.
Yeah, employment.
That's the
Yeah.
labor.
Right,
court, yeah.
right up the road, right.
Right up this.
You're absolutely
next
correct.
door.
It's right next door.
That way, yeah, I
Next
think.
door.
This is Israeli law. What about halacha? Does halacha, according to halacha, must you go to a beis din?
For what? For get or for dini
Is
mamas?
it something even with a criminal law aspect?
Criminal.
Or-
Oh, okay. Criminal. We're not going to get to criminal. I don't know any based in that deals with criminal.
Because it's a state thing.
Well, according to halacha,
Only state can bring it.
It would be a very interesting question if the Israeli government said, you know what, we want to go halachic. Everything we're going to do according to halakha, the whole country. Okay, now who wants to sit on cases of speeding tickets, and who wants to sit in cases of robbery and other things I'd just rather not talk about or think about, but unfortunately, do happen in society. Would the rabbi say, yeah, we want to do that? I guess we would, but we're not there.
But many civil cases have a criminal law aspect. So when someone owes you money, it can be theft at the same time, which is criminal law. And there's a civil law aspect of one owing another money.
Yes, we don't deal with the criminal part. We can't put somebody in jail.
I understand.
You owe the money because you stole, and therefore we're going to put you in jail. If the person decided that he wants to deal with it civilly, he can come to us. If he wants to go to the police, he can go to the police. If he wants to do both, he can do both. But we can't deal with the criminal part. We don't try to.
So I was a bit confused when somebody mentioned the labour courts.
Yeah.
That's obviously a civil court, but you can
Right.
deal with labour issues.
Very complicated. Okay, it's a very
But you
good
said you
question.
don't
This is
refuse it.
off
But you said you
script.
don't refuse it.
We have done it. We have to do it very carefully. There are many laws in this country that are called it comes from an English word, but I don't remember using it that much in English in this context. Cogentiot. Chukim cogentiem. Okay, I guess it comes from the word cogent. But it basically means is something that you cannot relinquish your rights to. Okay, if I sign a labor agreement that I'm going to work, but I accept that I'm not going to get minimum wage. Okay, and I promised and I swore on 500 chumashim that I'm not going to ask for minimum wage, or that you don't have to give me vacation, or that I'll work 16-hour days. Okay, and then after a while somebody says to me, "Are you crazy? Why are you working 16 hours days?" Well, I promised. I keep my word. If the guy goes, perhaps I don't want to go on a limb, but one could claim that according to halacha, you agreed. You agreed. It was a crazy agreement, but you agreed. The law of the land is that no, there's certain things you're not allowed to work for under the minimum wage, and you're not allowed to work more than certain hours in a week, and you're not allowed to not have vacation, and you're not allowed to not have to work full time and have pension. You can get out of it with working through not hiring as if whatever. I don't want to get into all the details. So a lot of the laws of labor are cogenti, okay, are this type that you can't waive them. And therefore, some of them are not given to arbitration. Okay, if you want to go to arbitration, and the two sides agree that the arbitrator will be none less than the retired Chief Justice of the State of Israel. Okay, and a month after retiring, that former Chief Justice makes a ruling as an arbitrator. If they go down the street to that court might say, likely would say, the arbitration agreement is not valid. It depends what they're discussing, what they're not discussing, the status, not the status. It gets very complicated. Now, part of it can can be, or the problem can be alleviated by making it crystal clear to the sides. Do you understand, by according to the state of Israel, they expect you to go to the labor courts? Are you both aware of that? Yes. You want to go specifically to Beis Din? Yes. And you're not going to complain that somebody forced you, pressured you. That in that case, from what we understand from legal advice, is that usually the courts the labor courts will not say, after somebody loses, well, I lost here, I'm going to go and complain. No, it's not fair. They'll see the transcript of the court occasion where we said very specifically, you sure you want to be, both sides want to be here? Then they can't say, but it depends what it is. If it was about getting paid under the minimum wage, I imagine no. They say, no, we're not letting that go. And they'll get angry at the Beis Din because you're ruining society. Because once you allow this person to take advantage of the workers, then it trickles down to other people. It puts pressure on other possible employees, and it's against what's called against on any ruling. If it's against Tovat Hamdina, if it's against the welfare of the state or of society, they can say no. That you can't do something which messes up society, so to speak. Yes.
When you sit on a bed, do you sit on multiple cases or one case at a time?
I presently, if you look at my discount key, I have about all my personal life is here. I'm sitting probably about 9 cases, something like that. Some of them just started and we're going to finish quickly, and some of them are the ones that are 3-4 years. And I'm not going to it could depending on the situation, could be weeks or months in between cases. We have time to do others, but in the courts as well. They don't wait. I mean, maybe a really big case, they only do that. But at 9 to 10 o'clock you have in this case, at 10 to 11 o'clock you have in this case, and sometimes sometimes it could be a little bit over any human being's head, and the courts they complain that they have. But it's by the way, one of the reasons the court system in Israel doesn't feel that Beis Din like ours is competition. Maybe some people do. Most of them, we don't have enough manpower for all the cases. We're very happy things go to arbitration. Okay, if we'll start usurping and start, saying, "Oh, who care?"
You're doing only arbitration.
Only arbitration.
Oh, so that's the difference.
Only arbitration.
But are they deem that actually hear litigant cases where it's not pshara, where it's actual din?
No, I didn't say pshara is not. Arbitration does not mean pshara. Arbitration means that you agreed to come to us.
Because in America, when they say arbitration, generally they think
there's arbitration, there's mediation. But next week we'll discuss that, the difference between them. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we rule based on compromise, and the courts also, they sometimes rule on compromise. But arbitration means more as far as the jurisdiction is concerned. Yes?
So, something I didn't understand. You said, well, if you're analyzing the law of Israel, well, the law of Israel won't allow you to go to Beis Din if it's labor law, if it's this and that. My question is halacha. I mean, Shulchan Aruch doesn't give some hatnaya. Well, if it's labor law and it's mandatory law, you can go. It said yachidef v'gidef if you go to Azkaot, that answer din Torah. So, milechatchila from halacha point of view, if say two religious people are in a labor dispute, if they don't go to a Beis Din, regardless of the law of Israel or other countries, chilef v'gidef et Hashem, no?
So, I would say like this. Maybe in certain cases, yes. Maybe in certain cases, yes. Again, there are elements of labor disputes that we can handle like anything else. But one of the rules is we need to be, at least this is our way of looking at it, we are required to be fair to litigants. To have a litigant go through a long process, could be an expensive process. Sometimes people come with lawyers, sometimes they don't. And then render a ruling, and then the person will try to get the money, and the other person will laugh in his face. So we can't do that to a person. That is, we need to cover his back. And therefore, when we're convinced that the two sides are both sincere about coming to us, and that they're not, they're not using it as a trick, and that they plan to keep it by us. And again, we're not doing something that is against society, the things that are illegal, okay? I can make an agreement with everybody in my block that we're gonna we're gonna speed down our block at 150 miles per kilometer. Everybody who lives in this block signs to it. So we see, like, you can't do that. That's bad for society. We can't allow that.
So not that.
So the society decided this is bad for society, and we're not allowing you to do it. That being the case, my hands are tied.
So what you're saying is another exception to the obligation to go to Beis Din. You said if one side doesn't want, if there's a small Jewish population. Another one is if the Beis Din believes it will be unenforceable.
If it will be unenforceable, I would be dependent on our basin. We won't do if it's unenforceable,
So that's
unless we're truly we feel that both sides are convinced that there's not going to be. But the way they're wonderful Batei Din that are much faster than ours and much cheaper than ours. You come in, they call it also the Beit Torah. You come in, you tell your rabbi a story in 10, 15 minutes. The next morning you get a 3-word answer. And that's it. Okay? No arbitration agreement signed. It doesn't stand up it won't stand up in court. And it's much less professional. But they're doing a great service because for many people, they don't need the whole thing. And they're just two people, they know they can trust each other. And that's it, and they save time, and there could be some mistakes there because they didn't look it up. And when you're, by the way, looking up, when you start writing, then you say, it made sense until you start writing. Once you start writing, like, oh, but I thought it makes sense, make a little bit less sense now that I'm writing it. And there's only one, often there's going to be one dayan. Yeah, but that's an alternative, but the way we do it, that's
they are going
halachic.
more according to Shulchan
Yeah, that's
Aruch
halachic, and and that's fine, but sort of alternative, in some ways alternative, okay? We have certain alternatives. If it's a small case and they want a fast answer, things go fast, you have one dayan. Somebody want to have one dayan, both sides want, then we're willing to do that.
I was gonna ask you,
Yeah.
if your Beis Din is set up that you have your own dayanim, 3 dayanim,
Right.
or you have it, the difference between Zabla and,
Okay, should we get to Zabla? Maybe we'll go a little bit briefly into Zabla. I don't want to be, it's one of these topics I don't want to go too much public, but okay, as far as jurisdiction, okay? About how do you know, sometimes the question of how do you know disputes about where to go to Beis Din. Okay, if you have a specific arbitration agreement, then you should be covered, although sometimes it can be reasons for dispute as well. But if you don't have an agreement and different people want to go to different Batei Din, then what do? Okay? So the biggest rule, and this I brought to you in source number 14, page 2, Hatovea, the middle of the source, the last 3 lines, page 3, source number 14, Hatovea tzurich leilech achar nitba im hu be'ir acheret. Okay, if they've come from 2 different places, you follow the place of the nitba. Okay, the tovea is the plaintiff, the nitba is the defendant. You go to the geographical place of the nitba. This has been expanded by the poskim, not just as far as place, but generally also as far as preference of Beis Din. Okay, one could be Yerushalayim. There are many Batei Din in Yerushalayim, so it's not a matter of place. We're both pet litigants from Yerushalayim, but one wants to go to this Beis Din, one wants to go to another Beis Din. Generally, also we follow the nitba. There is a situation in which the 2 sides cannot agree, and the tovea will say that I don't trust the nitba's Beis Din. I have reason not to trust nitba's Beis Din because we have a totally different philosophy on life, because they look like this and I look like that, and I can't believe that they could ever treat me fairly because he's there, and their crew, the other litigant looks like them, talks like them, has an accent like them, etc., etc. And I can't believe, by the way, it doesn't mean that you'll get unfair treatment. It's possible to look totally different and get totally fair treatment. But there are certain situations where you, it's called posel dayano shezeh, v'zeh posel dayano shezeh, that you do a zabla, which means, that's Rashi Tevet, v'zeh borer lo echad, v'zeh borer lo echad, that each litigant chooses a dayan, the 2 dayanim choose a third dayan, This is found in the Mishnah. It's the name of a parak. In practice, it almost never works well. Okay? It can be done beautifully. I know people who've set up Zablas to work beautifully. The number of horror cases cause that you should think once, twice, 3 times, 57 times before you go to a Zabla and before you agree as a dayan to be. I don't think I've ever been on the
It's a
Zabla
standard
Beis Din.
arbitration clause.
Why?
We can do an arbitration clause. It's a standard thing to say if each person picks his own person and they agree upon a third.
Okay,
That's a standard.
I would really not recommend it. I don't. In order to answer your question about why, I'd have to be critical.
Halacha is halacha.
I'd prefer not to be critical. And cast aspersions, because there are wonderful dayanim who do this on a regular basis or do it sometimes, and they could be the best and do the greatest job. So I don't want to say something that can be overly critical, but just as a warning, just certain things just usually don't work.
Can I say why
I
I
prefer
say
not.
it doesn't work?
I prefer not. Okay.
Can I just ask you something?
You're right.
You mentioned about bringing lawyers.
Yeah.
Presumably the lawyers that you would bring would have to be lawyers that know halacha, not lawyers that, otherwise what's the point? If the lawyers don't know halacha, what are they up? They don't
It's
know
a
what to
beautiful
argue.
question. I'm sorry for nodding my head, but I think it relates to what I said before, as far as legal logic being basically the same. There may be differences in halacha, but I expect of a lawyer to present why they think their side is right. Okay? I presume a Baldin who comes without. Let's say you come without a lawyer. And just tell your story. Why do you think you're right? You came to us for a reason. You think that you're right. Why do you think you're right? So they tell you why they think they're right. What they will say almost always will have halachic, but you can find something similar to it in the Gemara. Okay? Maybe we don't have paskin like it, maybe a little bit slightly different, but usually there's going to be some type of legal logic. A lawyer, his legal logic is more developed. His ability to go through the documents and find things that support is higher than his litigant. He can find the line in here. He can listen to a WhatsApp conversation. He can see, and find ammunition. Leave it to us, okay? I don't remember a case where we had a Toin Rabbani, and he came up with a source like, wow, good thing he was here because I would never have come up with that source, or anything similar. Like, wow, Baruch Hashem, because I didn't know that one. We have enough material, enough for things. 3 dayanim will find. Doesn't mean we're perfect. Doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. We can make mistakes, but the lawyer, the Toin Rabbani, you just bring us the case. I've had cases where the lawyers were not Jewish. A non-Jewish lawyer went against a religious institution. The non-Jewish lawyer won. Okay, he just presented the story in the code. And in this case, I think he had the advantage that the people that he represented were right. So
That's always good. That's a good case to get.
I think
Yeah.
what you're trying to say is a lawyer knows the legal elements of the case.
right,
We're trained to recognize the legal elements of the
Right.
case, so we can make a better argument based on those elements of the case.
and you can assume that if it's a fair legal system, that these things will count. So if I have to, present something in Saskatchewan, then I don't know the laws in Canada or the province of Saskatchewan. Presumably, if what I'm saying makes sense, they probably have some law that says something along these lines. And, go for it.
And also precedents play a major factor in citing legal precedent.
Right.
But you're not interested in legal precedent. You're interested in halacha.
It depends what it is.
In Israel.
It depends what it is, because it could help determine the law of the land, and it can help determine what the practice is. It could determine what the practice is, and also the people. There can different schools of thought on this, but there is a certain school of thought, a strong school of thought, I would say, to apply different sets of rules to different litigants. If I have litigants who are part of a milieu which is more secular or more Zionistic, more integrated in society, then my assumptions of what they had in mind when they signed their contract will be they probably had in mind the law of the land. If I have somebody who is in a closed society, okay, just to get things out of our backyard, if there's a dispute between two Amish people, okay, don't have electricity, they're not in touch with other people, they very likely have in mind an Amish set of mind and values, and when they made an agreement, what did they have in mind? So the Amish people I would treat one way, and the people who are more involved, mainstream, I would assume more that the law of the land and the standard practice go further. Okay, let's go on just a little bit further.
Rob, can I just quickly ask, what happens if you've got two parties and one is going to bring a very high-powered lawyer and the other one doesn't have money to bring a lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a bit unfair that you...
Question unfair to who?
Unfair to the one that doesn't have the money.
That is the one of my jobs at Eretz Chemda is to put out a weekly parsha sheet. One part of the parsha sheet is the column which is called, to most you might know, is the Rabbi. But one of the things I usually translate my Rosh Kollel of Carmel's Divrei Torah. Okay, this is not what it's off script, but it's very much within today's topic. He points out there is somewhat of a we're a little bit torn between our desire to help the poor and the weak and our requirement to be fair. Okay, Vidal says, Vidal lo te'adar b'rivo. You shouldn't give an advantage to a poor person. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't give an advantage to a rich person, and shouldn't give it to an advantage to a poor person. So, do we give advantage to a poor person? So, Rav Carmel pointed out that if you compare British law, common law, I guess they call it, and halacha, we use, I think it's called in English, the inquisitory approach, whereas the British use the adversarial approach. I think that's what's called in English. In other words, the lawyers interrogate the other sides. Okay, somebody gives this case. Okay, I'm right because of this and this and this. The lawyer presents it, and the other lawyer argues with him. And the judge listens. The judge is not supposed to ask hard questions to one on the side. And based in, we ask... Sorry, I shut it off. Let's see, I have to unlock before you can shut off. That's the problem. Okay, sorry. We ask can ask hard questions of the litigant. You said this 1 second, but didn't you say 5 minutes ago that? Based on this system, if one comes with a high-powered lawyer, then still the lawyer plays a much more minor role. He's not the star. We tell the litigants, you present your story. The lawyer was, no, I want to tell. No, you weren't there. You heard from your client? We want to hear from your client. We want to hear from him. You want to afterwards say, well, based on this precedent, based on this, fine. But the Dayanim are more the stars of the show, and therefore we level the playing field. Okay, so in that way, without whoever, you could have the poor person came with the lawyer, and the rich person came without the lawyer. Okay, by the way, you can get free legal. Usually they're not in the same level, but you can get a law student from a clinic and stuff. You can get that as well. I don't think. I don't want to go on a limb on this. We allow lawyers. We have no problem with lawyers coming. We have no problem with lawyers not coming. We are marking the following. We ask somebody, are you coming with the lawyer or not? The secretary asks. We don't speak to the litigants outside based in, but the secretary will ask, are you coming with a lawyer? And a person says no, and this has happened, and then he ends up, yes, coming with a lawyer, and the secretary had told the other one's coming without a lawyer. Well, say he's now with a lawyer. So sometimes it was a good reason. I thought I wasn't coming with a lawyer at the last minute. I realized that. You know, we deal with, but that's an issue. That's a problem. That you know in advance, it's important to you to be. If you say, listen, I can't afford it, or I don't want it, or lawyers annoy me, and I'm going out, then it's fine. And it's our job to not to be the lawyer of the other side, but to make sure that everybody got to say his piece and everybody got to be interrogated and make sure that what he said made sense.
And there's no written submissions of the sides?
You want to get to written submissions? Okay, I'm going to skip now to page.
As a follow-up, because that's
Good. I mean, I'm partially, have my game plan, but the game plan was also to go along as long as on the topic, to go with what you bring. Source number 17. Last source over here. And we're towards the end of our time. Source number 17 is a shach, which is perhaps the most important acharon on Choshen Mishpat. Yeah, then you were there. But the shach quotes a sefer called the Be'er Sheva, who was about 50, 100 years before, probably 50 years before him, about the question, how much information does the plaintiff need to provide before the court case? And the Be'er Sheva says very little. Basically, I don't have to say my case beforehand. Okay, why? Because if I tell him, he's going to start preparing lies. Okay, let me hit him with the truth, and they'll say, yeah, I guess so, before he can think up lies. So Be'er Sheva says that, no, you don't have to, you can keep secrets by you. You have to say, I'm suing you, come to court, the court will send the summons, the person should come, two people should come at a certain time, that's it. Simple reading of the Be'er Sheva is, you don't even tell how much money you're being toveh, you're claiming. The shach disagrees, and we generally accept the psak of the shach here, in general and here, and that is that you have a right to know how much money is being discussed. Why?
You might decide not to go for it.
Exactly. Excellent. What we started with, right? But said to avoid based in. How much he's asking for 50 shekel. Yeah, look, come on, 50 shekel, here, take it. I mean, you need to fight over 50 shekel. Okay? 500 shekel? Well, think about it. 5 million shekel? Whoa, no, I'm not saying, why fight over 5 million shekel? No, 5 million shekel, I have no choice but to fight. So therefore the shach says you need to tell him that. The question is, okay, do you have to tell him why? So we generally assume that that the basic idea of why is also yes, because I need to, what's he talking about? Okay, I mean, I'll agree, maybe if he says that, I don't know, he has some type of claim, we're neighbors, and that he has damage caused that because of there was a leak in my house, it caused damage by him. I don't know if he's right or if he's wrong, but it could be. He's asking me for 1,000 shekel. Yalla, give him 1,000 shekel. If he says you owe 1,000 shekel because you borrowed 1,000 shekel from me, say, this guy's the big. I've never borrowed 1,000 shekel. I've never borrowed 5 cents from anybody. I never borrow money. He's a liar. I'm not willing to pay a penny. So we have a right to know what the basic idea. We have what my proof is. I have witnesses. I don't have witnesses. The details the shach agrees you don't need to go to. We encourage a serious ktav tfiyah, letter of claim letter by the tovea. Sometimes we don't get the most serious of all jobs done. Sometimes it's 5 lines. We usually like at least if it's a page or 2 to explain what the situation is. The nitba, we like if the nitba also will give something in writing, because if both sides give something in writing, then we prepare. The basic preparation is to read the case and to think about it. And when the Dayana meet in the minutes before the basin, what questions do you think we should ask? What issues?
About interrogatories and stuff before.
What's that?
About interrogatories and discovery before.
Right.
Were the case.
So we don't do usually not that serious amount, but that we prefer. If only the tovea writes his side, the nitba doesn't, then we don't read the tovea either. We don't read the plaintiffs either. And that's based on the rule of shamoa ben achichem. That you should hear basically simultaneously. You can't actually only, Hashem at Har Sinai, you said the Shamor and Zachar together, can't hear exactly simultaneously, but in the same sitting you get from both sides. Because if you I still feel silly sometimes. I'll read a claim, but say, why are we doing this? Obviously the Toveh is right. It's such an open and shut close that they're right. Like, why can't what the Nif is going to answer to this? Because usually people come to the base not liars, not the whole thing. And I've trained myself not to be surprised anymore. The Nif says a story, and it's totally different. In some ways, when you look at it, they're not really, nobody needs to be lying. It's just a totally different perspective in the same story. So we don't want a situation, just to read the Toveh, and I'll go to bed, and I'll go to work the day in Torah, think, this is going to be easy. You want to be 5 minutes because obviously Toveh is right. We don't want that psychological advantage of the Toveh. So if the Nitba hasn't presented his side, then we won't read the Toveh either. Okay, that's based on the pasuk of Shamoa ben Achichem as understood by the Gemara. I think I'm going to have to be towards finishing. A lot of things I didn't get to. A lot of things that I did get to that I wasn't planning to. And again, that was a plan. Thank you for being very engaging. Sorry for people on Zoom. Those who hear Zoom, know that I love answering questions on Zoom, but here it's not shaykh. I can't even, couldn't even see with the telescope, see what, but so I thank you for leading me, hopefully from my perspective, it was good directions. And next time the main topic will be look out for compromise. I may also do certain things that I feel bad that we didn't get to this time, but that is.
Could we bring this back?
If you can, we might use it again. I prefer not to retype it. If I decide that I do want to get back to something.
Thank you very much.
You have to. Rabbi Shore is the boss. Okay, whatever he says is fine with me.
I just want people to know I did not know it was.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very well.